In the quiet town of Nakuru, the church buzzed with whispers louder than the wedding bells themselves. People leaned toward one another, shaking their heads in disbelief. Ao, barely past 20, walked slowly down the aisle in a flowing white dress. Her expression was calm, but her heart carried a heavy weight. At the altar, there was no groom standing tall with pride. Instead, a hospital bed awaited her. Lying in it was Bantao, a wealthy businessman unmoving, locked in a coma for months. The congregation stared in shock. Some gasped and covered their mouths, whispering furiously. Why marry a man who couldn't even see her face? Who couldn't hold her hand or call her name? Others sneered with cruelty, muttering that she only wanted his wealth. Gold digger, one man scoffed under his breath. A few pitied her, believing she must be desperate, because surely no young woman would choose such a life. But Ao's steps did not falter. In her eyes burned a quiet fire that silenced every insult, though no one could grasp its meaning. She gazed at Bantao with a steady resolve, one even his family couldn't explain. As the priest spoke the vows, Ao's trembling voice promised loyalty to a man who could not respond. The air shifted. Some guests gasped, others sneered, but none could look away. In that moment, Ao's wedding became the most shocking event Nakuru had ever witnessed. The ceremony had barely ended before the whispers grew into shouts spreading across town. From tea shops to market stalls, every street corner echoed with the same story. Did you hear? Ao married the man in a coma. Like wildfire on dry grass, the news consumed Nakuru. Some laughed cruelly, mocking her as too young and foolish. Others, sharper in tone, claimed she only wanted Bantao's fortune. She's clever, one woman sneered. Marry a rich man who can't talk back, what a scheme. Even her neighbors, once polite with their greetings, turned their backs. Elderly women whispered loudly enough for her to hear, calling her shameless. Men laughed in groups, saying she must be desperate to bind herself to a man who couldn't even stand beside her. Parents told their children not to play near her home, as though she carried a curse. Some gossip grew darker, predicting that once Bantao died, she would squander his wealth and disappear. But the harshest blows came from Bantao's own family. His sister Nurai, tall, proud, and full of scorn, made it her mission to disgrace Ao at every chance. Before crowds, she spoke loudly, calling Ao nothing more than a greedy village girl. Don't be fooled by her silence, Nurai warned anyone who would listen. She's only here for the money. Nothing else. The rest of the family echoed her venom, throwing sharp words and glaring at Ao as if she had stolen from them. Even her own relatives turned against her. Family who once welcomed her stopped opening their doors. Cousins snickered behind her back, mocking her choice. Aunts and uncles shook their heads whenever her name was mentioned. At family gatherings, her chair sat empty. She became the outsider, the black sheep, someone they no longer wished to be tied to. Yet through it all, Ao stayed silent. She didn't argue with the gossip, nor defend herself against Nurai's cruel words. Instead, she carried a soft smile, even when her heart ached. She walked through the markets with her head high, ignoring the stares that felt like flames against her skin. Her silence confused people. If she were guilty, wouldn't she try to explain herself? But Ao held her secret close. What no one knew was that greed had nothing to do with her choice. It wasn't money that bound her to Bantao, but something much deeper. She carried a memory, a debt of kindness no rumor could erase. She endured humiliation because she knew the truth. One day, everyone else would see it, too. For now, the town mocked her as a fool, a gold digger. But behind her quiet smile lay a love and loyalty strong enough to shake the very place that scorned her. Ao often drifted back into memories, the moments that shaped her into the woman walking down Nakuru's aisle that unforgettable morning. She had grown up in Kasengo, a struggling little village where survival was a daily fight. Her father remarried when she was young, leaving her mother to raise her alone. Money was always scarce. Some days they ate. Other days they went hungry. Their tiny house seemed to shrink with each passing year, filled with silence and worry. Ao learned early that life was unfair, that kindness was rare, and that dreams could vanish under the weight of poverty. She remembered nights going to bed with an empty stomach, hiding her tears so her exhausted mother wouldn't see. Villagers whispered about their poverty, making her feel small and invisible. School offered no escape. She wore tattered shoes and faded dresses, feeling the sting of being different from classmates with more. She learned to smile through the pain, to bury her hurt because no one cared. Then came the day everything shifted, though the village never noticed. Bantao, then a young businessman doing charity work, had come to Kasengo. One afternoon, he saw Ao carrying water from the river, her hands cracked and raw from labor. Something in her eyes caught his attention. Not despair, not defeat, but a quiet strength. He approached gently, without making a scene. He gave her food, schoolbooks, and even helped her mother with small loans, never seeking praise. Before leaving, Bantao smiled and spoke words she would never forget. Kindness is an investment. It always returns. Ao had been too young to grasp it fully, but she remembered his dignity, how he treated her without pity or shame. Those simple gestures, unnoticed by others, lit a spark inside her. She began to believe that people like him existed, that generosity could change lives, and that perhaps one day someone would believe in her the way he had. Years later, those memories became her anchor. When Nikuru judged her, when people sneered at her for marrying a man in a coma, she closed her eyes and remembered Bantao's kindness. That memory gave her strength. It reminded her why she made a choice no one could understand. Every insult, every mocking glance only deepened her resolve. Bantao had once preserved her dignity and hope. Now, in her own steadfast way, she would repay that kindness no matter the cost. Just months before Bantao's accident, life between them had felt lighter, even playful. One afternoon, in his sunlit office overlooking the city, he turned to her with a teasing grin and a spark in his eyes. "Hey Ao," he said. "If anything ever happens to me, I'd want you to take care of everything I've built. My businesses, my home, even my chaos." He laughed softly, treating it like a joke. Just a casual remark between friends. Ao laughed too, never realizing how serious those words would one day become. She never truly believed it. Not then, not ever. But fate has a merciless way of twisting casual words into reality. Only weeks later, the tragedy struck. Bantao, the man once brimming with energy and life, now lay confined to a hospital bed, motionless, trapped inside his own silent body. His relatives arrived almost instantly, not out of love or worry, but with eyes sharpened by greed. His sister, Nurai, and the rest hovered like vultures, circling, prying into his accounts, his properties, his investments, as if his coma stripped him of humanity and left him only as a prize to be claimed. Their whispers filled the halls, schemes laced beneath every word. They were already plotting to seize his empire before anyone could intervene. Ao stood quietly, her chest aching yet her mind whirling. She remembered that offhand remark Bantao had once made in his office, the words he spoke in jest that now sounded like an order. She knew in that moment that no one else would protect him. If she did nothing, everything he had built with sweat and sacrifice would be torn apart by selfish hands. Fear gnawed at her, but determination rose stronger. She could not let his legacy be stolen. And so Ao made a decision so daring it would leave people stunned. She resolved to marry Bantao, legally, while he lay in the hospital, unable to give consent in the way the world expected. It was a gamble that invited ridicule, scorn, even outrage. She knew whispers would brand her greedy, desperate, or delusional. And they did, even before the ceremony. But in her heart, she understood. It was the only way to protect the man who had once lifted her from despair, and to safeguard the empire he had spent a lifetime creating. The weight of the decision pressed heavy, yet it carried a strange power. She went to the lawyer's office, signed the papers, and later that day stood by Bantao's bedside in the small hospital chapel as the minister spoke words of union. The town would never understand. To them, she was just a woman marrying a man in a coma. They couldn't see the loyalty, the gratitude, the love behind her choice. And though the voices of judgment would never quiet, Ao carried within her a silent satisfaction. She had kept a promise no one else even knew existed. By the next morning, whispers ran wild through Nikuru, but nothing compared to the storm erupting inside Bantao's mansion. Nurai, proud and arrogant, was the first to arrive. Her heels clicked furiously against the marble floor as she stormed in like a tempest. Her eyes burned when she saw Ao standing calmly near the grand staircase, the keys to the mansion gleaming in her hand. Nurai had expected fear, trembling, pleading, maybe even retreat. Instead, Ao's unshaken composure made her rage boil hotter. "You think you can just walk in here and take what belongs to us?" Nurai spat, her voice echoing off the walls. She flung her arms as though trying to shove Ao out by force. "You're nothing but a peasant girl pretending to be queen. A nobody playing ruler in a house that has always been ours." The gathered relatives, eager to witness Ao's humiliation, smirked and waited for her to crumble. Some sneered openly, certain she would falter. But Ao stood steady. Her gaze held Nurai's with quiet, unwavering strength. Then, in a single firm step, she accepted the house keys from the lawyer who had arrived to finalize the documents. Clearing his throat, the man announced, "As per Mr. Bantau's instructions and the marriage contract signed yesterday, all of his assets, businesses, and estates are now under the guardianship of his wife Ao. Legally, everything he built belongs to her to protect." The room froze. Silence swallowed every corner. Nurai's face drained of color, her haughty demeanor collapsing into disbelief. Those same relatives who mocked and ridiculed Ao the day before now bowed their heads, stunned into shame. Murmurs filled the air, some trying to excuse their words, others unable to believe what they had heard. Where they had expected Ao's downfall, they were now witnessing her triumph. Calm, unshaken, victorious. Ao's lips curved faintly. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The pale faces, the stammering voices, the failed attempts at regaining composure. All of it spoke louder than any victory speech. She had done what no one else dared. She had stood against greed, arrogance, and cruelty, securing everything that rightfully belonged to Bantau and honoring the trust he had placed in her. The contrast was undeniable. Yesterday, the town had mocked a foolish girl for marrying a silent man. Today, that same girl held the power, the legal authority, and the dignity once reserved for Bantau himself. And the world, once so quick to laugh, was now forced to learn a bitter truth about greed, judgment, and the danger of underestimating loyalty. Later, when the noise had faded and she stood by Bantau's empty hospital bed, Ao whispered softly, almost like a prayer, "I will guard it all. No one will take from him what he has built." And in that moment, the true weight of her love became clear. A strength no gossip, insult, or greedy hand could ever shake. One quiet night, the mansion lay silent, yet Ao's thoughts were restless. She sat at Bantau's bedside, the steady hum of machines filling the stillness, his warm hand resting in hers. Though he could not move or speak, she felt the presence of the man who had changed her life. Beyond the hospital walls, gossip and hatred still raged. But here only memories mattered. She leaned closer, her voice low, almost as if words alone could reach him where he drifted. "Do you remember?" she whispered. "The day you helped me when no one else cared? When I had nothing, you gave me hope. You made me feel like I mattered when the world had turned away. I've never forgotten." Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears back, her voice steady. These words weren't meant for the town or for his family. They were only for him, the man who had shown her what true kindness was. And suddenly, the truth of her marriage stood clear. It wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about status. The world could never understand that. She hadn't married Bantau for riches or mansions. She had married him for something far greater. To protect him, his legacy, and the dignity he had once given her. Ao thought of Kasengo, the hungry nights, the lonely days, the small acts of kindness that had lit her path. She remembered the food he had sent, the books, the quiet help for her mother, and above all, the lesson he had left her with. Kindness is an investment, and it always returns. Now, by his side, she knew she had repaid that debt in the only way possible. By standing for him when no one else would, by marrying him when the world doubted her, by shielding his legacy from greedy hands. She pressed his hand gently, her voice tender yet fierce with resolve. "I didn't do this for money, Bantau. I did this for you. Because when I had nothing, you believed in me. And now, I will believe in you. I will protect everything you've built, no matter what anyone says." The world outside could keep whispering, keep judging, keep mocking. But in this quiet hospital room, the truth belonged only to them. She had not married a man in a coma for wealth. She had become the wife of a man lying in a coma. Out of honor, out of loyalty, out of love. A love that asked for no applause, no recognition, no proof. As she sat beside him, watching the steady rhythm of his breath, certainty rooted deep inside her. One day the world would see that Ao's choice had been made with courage, wisdom, and selflessness. The courtroom carried a heaviness that pressed on every heart. Nurai sat at the front, her face burning with rage and disbelief. Around her, Bantao's relatives whispered furiously, gripping documents they believed would shatter Ao's claim. They wanted everything, the businesses, the mansion, the wealth, snatched back from the girl they had always dismissed. They trusted the law to favor them, convinced that a young woman who had wed a man in a coma would be unmasked as a deceiver. Then the judge entered. Silence swallowed the room. Every gaze fixed on the bench as the trial began. Nurai's voice rang sharp, pointing, accusing. She tricked him. She married him when he was defenseless. She's here for money. Her shouts ricocheted against the walls while the family nodded, eager for the judge to be swayed by their fury. But Ao's lawyer rose calmly, presenting Bantao's will and the marriage certificate, line by line, detail by detail. Every clause, every signature confirmed one thing. Bantao had entrusted Ao with his life's work. He had named her the rightful guardian of all he had built, should anything happen to him. The documents carried undeniable weight. Nurai's smugness faltered as the judge studied them carefully. At last, the judge spoke with steady authority. The evidence shows clearly that Ao is both the legal wife and the rightful guardian of Mr. Bantao's estate. All claims against her are dismissed. The words struck like lightning. Nurai's face drained of color, her hands shaking as the truth sank in. They had lost. Every scheme, every plan to seize Bantao's empire collapsed under the very papers they had mocked. The courtroom emptied slowly, whispers trailing outside. The townspeople, who once ridiculed Ao, now murmured about the disgrace of Bantao's family, their greed, their arrogance, their blindness to the loyalty of one young woman. Nurai and her kin walked the streets with lowered heads, avoiding the stares and mutters of neighbors who once pitied them. Ao, by contrast, stepped out with quiet dignity. No boasting, no loud celebration. Her victory was measured, graceful, and complete. She had borne ridicule and judgment, but she emerged not only legally vindicated, but morally unshaken. She had protected Bantao's legacy and honored the man who had saved her when she had nothing. For the first time, the town recognized its mistake. Gossip no longer painted Ao as a fool, but turned instead against Bantao's family. People began to admire her, not for riches but for loyalty, courage, and strength. Nurai's humiliation was absolute, and the lesson plain. Greed and pride could never triumph over devotion and honor, no matter how underestimated their opponent. Months slipped by, and Nikuru settled into a strange rhythm. Bantao remained motionless in his hospital bed, and most assumed he would never wake. Whispers spread that Ao had chosen wrongly, that she was chained to a life beside a man who might never return. Even some of her supporters quietly wondered if her sacrifice had been in vain. But Ao never doubted. Each day, she sat faithfully at Bantao's side. She fed him gently, wiped his brow, shifted his pillows for comfort. She spoke to him constantly, her tone soft but full of life, as if her words alone might pierce the silence. She read him his favorite stories, shared news of the town, retold moments that once made him laugh. She wept quietly at sorrowful passages, chuckled at the light-hearted ones, always holding his hand, her thumb tracing soothing circles on his skin. The nurses watched in awe, whispering of a devotion they had never witnessed. "She never leaves," one murmured. "Even when mocked, even when exhausted, she stays." Doctors admired her perseverance but reminded her that comas rarely broke, miracles rarely came. Still, Ao neither complained nor questioned fate. Then one unremarkable morning, the extraordinary happened. Ao was reading aloud from a book found in his study, a tale of bravery and kindness. She leaned to adjust his blanket when she felt it, a firm squeeze against her hand. Her breath caught. She stared down. Bantao's eyelids fluttered, and within them sparked awareness. Life returning. Gasps filled the room as nurses rushed to the bed, eyes wide with shock. Doctors hurried in, stunned yet hopeful. He's responding, one whispered. This is incredible. Tears streamed down Ao's face, not of despair, but of joy. Clutching his hand, she whispered, I'm here. I've always been here. You're safe. Word of the miracle rippled through Nakuru. The same people who mocked Ao as foolish now waited breathless with wonder. Those who doubted her loyalty now watched in awe as the impossible unfolded. Ao smiled through her tears. She had stayed. She had protected. She had believed. And now fate itself seemed to reward her. In that quiet hospital room, with Bantao's fingers clasping hers and his eyes blinking open, the world witnessed the strength of patience, devotion, and unbreakable love. Bantao blinked slowly, adjusting to the soft light. At first, only blurs and colors. Machines hummed around him, life flowing where he had been absent so long. Clarity returned, and realization followed. Something extraordinary had happened. Ao was there, still there, her hand in his, her face wet with tears but glowing with relief. Gratitude swelled in him. Memory trickled back. The accident, the darkness, the silence, and the betrayal. His family had not been there. Nurai and the rest had abandoned him, swallowed by greed. But Ao, this woman who had married him while he lay helpless, had remained. She had shielded not only his life, but everything he had built. Tears blurred his vision. Ao, he whispered, voice weak but full of feeling. She leaned close, brushing hair from his forehead, her hand never leaving his. You've given me more than life, he murmured. You've given me loyalty. A love no one else could. You stayed when everyone else turned away. You fought for me, for us. Her tears fell freely now. But she laughed softly, trembling with relief. I never left, Bantao. I promised to protect you and I did. Nothing could break that. News of Bantao's awakening spread like wildfire. The town that once jeered at Ao now stood in awe. The girl they had labeled greedy and foolish had shown unshakable courage. She had proven that true power lies not in wealth or status, but in devotion and heart. Neighbors who once whispered now lowered their heads in respect. Gossip shifted, no longer about gold digging, but about bravery and faith. Even strangers at the hospital paused, inspired by love so steadfast it seemed unreal. As Bantao's strength returned slowly, he knew he owed everything, his life, his legacy, his peace, to Ao. She, the girl once ridiculed, had become his protector, his partner, his hero. And as sunlight filled the room, he knew with certainty. The world could doubt, sneer, or misjudge, but loyalty and love would always shine through. Ao had proven it beyond question. News of Bantao's recovery soon drew the entire town to the mansion. People once eager to call Ao a gold digger, now crowded with shame and curiosity. They had seen him alive, awake, safe, but they still didn't know why she had done it. Ao stepped forward, calm, her gaze steady as she raised a hand. I did not marry Bantao for wealth, she said, her voice gentle but strong. Not for power, nor for status. I married him to protect a man who gave me hope when I had none, to guard the life he built, and to honor the kindness he once showed me when no one else cared. Gasps spread through the crowd. Some bowed their heads in guilt. Neighbors who once mocked her now listened, eyes filled with respect. Even her own relatives who had turned away felt regret and awe. Nurai herself stood pale, silenced by the depth of Ao's truth. All the whispers, the laughter, the judgment. Ao continued unwavering. I endured them because I knew the truth. Loyalty, gratitude, and love are worth more than gold. My devotion was never about wealth. It was about doing what was right, standing by someone who stood by me, and protecting what truly mattered. For the first time, the town saw her not as a foolish girl, but as a woman of extraordinary strength. Quiet cheers rose, growing louder until admiration filled the air. Mothers told daughters of her courage. Men nodded in respect for her resolve. Ao's eyes sought Bantao, who smiled weakly but knowingly. She had kept her promise. She had defended his trust, his name, his life. The girl they once mocked had become a symbol of devotion, sacrifice, and honor. And Nakuru finally understood. True strength is not measured by wealth or power, but by the heart. Ao had proven it. Quietly, fiercely, and forever.